Imagine walking into work every day knowing that if things go wrong, someone has your back. Not just your manager, not just your team, but the entire organization. Imagine a workplace where people don't wake up with anxiety, where mistakes are not met with fear, and where loyalty is not demanded, but earned. Simon Sinek argues that such environments are not rare accidents. They are the result of a specific kind of leadership. Leadership where those at the top choose to eat last. This book is not about charisma, authority, or power. It is about creating environments where people feel safe. Because when people feel safe, they cooperate. When they cooperate, they trust. And when trust exists, extraordinary things become possible. Part 1. Our need to feel safe. Chapter 1. Protection from above. Simon Sinek opens the book with a vivid and emotionally charged story from the mountains of Afghanistan shortly after September 11th. A group of 22 American Special Operations soldiers is moving through hostile terrain, deep in enemy territory, escorting a captured high-value target. The night is pitch dark, visibility is almost zero, and they know they're being watched. Every step carries the possibility of death. High above them, flying an A-10 Warthog, is Captain Mike Drowley, known by his call sign Johnny Bravo. The A-10 is not a sleek or glamorous aircraft. It is slow, heavily armored, and designed for one purpose: to protect troops on the ground. Because of heavy cloud cover, Johnny Bravo cannot see the soldiers below him. He has no visual confirmation of their situation. All he has is radio contact and his instincts. Despite the extreme risk involved, Johnny Bravo decides to descend through the clouds into a narrow valley filled with enemy fire. He is not ordered to do this. In fact, protocol would suggest he stays safe above the clouds. But he chooses danger for himself to reduce danger for others. When the call "troops in contact" comes through the radio, he commits fully, flying blindly through tracer fire, counting seconds to avoid crashing into the mountains, and unloading his weapons to protect the soldiers below. That night, all 22 soldiers return home alive. Johnny Bravo receives no bonus, no promotion, and no public recognition. For him, this was simply his responsibility. Sinek uses this story to define leadership. Leadership is not about rank, authority, or privilege. Leadership is the willingness to sacrifice oneself for the safety of others. Johnny Bravo was willing to risk his life because he felt deep empathy for the people on the ground. He imagined himself in their position and acted accordingly. This story introduces the central idea of the book. When leaders protect their people, people will protect each other. This sense of protection creates what Sinek calls a circle of safety, an environment where individuals feel secure, valued, and supported. Inside this circle, trust grows naturally, cooperation increases, and extraordinary performance becomes possible. Chapter 2. Employees are people too. Sinek shifts from the battlefield to the corporate world, illustrating that the same principles apply in business. He tells the story of Barry Wemmeler, a manufacturing company led by CEO Bob Chapman. When Chapman acquired struggling companies, he noticed a pattern. Employees were treated like parts in a machine rather than human beings. At one factory, workers' days were dictated by bells. They punched time clocks, waited for permission to take breaks, and were restricted from accessing tools and parts without supervision. Office employees, meanwhile, enjoyed freedom and trust. This division sent a clear message. Some people were trusted, others were not. Chapman did something unusual. Instead of introducing new strategies or cutting costs, he listened. He sat with employees and asked them how work made them feel. One employee admitted he felt trusted only when he was away from the factory, installing equipment at customer sites. Inside the plant, he felt constantly monitored and controlled. Chapman responded by removing the symbols of distrust. Time clocks were taken down. Bells were removed. Locked cages holding tools and parts were opened. Everyone was treated the same, regardless of role or title. Employees were trusted to act responsibly. The impact was dramatic. Trust replaced fear. Employees began helping one another, caring for machines as if they were their own, and even donating vacation days to coworkers facing personal crises. Theft dropped to almost zero. Productivity increased. Revenue grew significantly. The lesson is clear. When leaders treat employees as human beings, worthy of trust, dignity, and care, people respond with loyalty and commitment. They don't work harder because they're forced to. They work harder because they want to. Chapter 3, Belonging. To explain the power of belonging, Sinek turns to the United States Marine Corps. Marine boot camp is intentionally designed to strip away individual identity and replace it with group identity. Recruits are taught from day one that words like I and me no longer matter. What matters is we. Through shared hardship, exhaustion, and discipline, recruits form deep bonds. By the end of training, they're no longer acting for themselves, but for each other. When a Marine earns the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, it represents more than completion of training. It represents belonging to something larger than oneself. This sense of belonging creates a circle of safety. Marines trust that the person beside them will protect them, just as they will do the same. Because they feel safe with one another, they can focus fully on facing dangers from the outside. Sinek explains that the same principle applies in organizations. The greatest strength of any group does not come from individual talent, but from how well people pull together. Leaders play a critical role in this. When leaders only protect a small inner circle, fear spreads and politics take over. But when leaders extend protection to everyone, trust becomes the foundation of the culture. Belonging is not a soft concept. It is a biological and psychological need. When people feel they belong, they are more resilient, more cooperative, and more willing to sacrifice for the group. Chapter 4, Yeah, but Sinek anticipates resistance to these ideas. Many people respond with yeah, but bills have to be paid. Yeah, but shareholders demand results. Yeah, but this isn't realistic in the real world. Employees often stay in unhealthy workplaces because they feel trapped by financial responsibilities. Leaders feel trapped by market pressures and quarterly targets. As a result, both sides accept unsafe environments as unavoidable. Sinek challenges this belief with evidence. Research shows that toxic workplaces cause severe stress, anxiety, depression, and even heart disease. In some cases, having a job you hate is worse for your health than being unemployed. Fear-based cultures lead to disengagement, high turnover, and poor performance. People stop caring, stop innovating, and stop trusting. The cost of ignoring human well-being is far greater than the cost of investing in it. The question is not whether we can afford to put people first. The real question is whether we can afford not to. Part 2. Powerful Forces. Chapter 5. When Enough Was Enough. Sinek begins to explain why we behave the way we do by introducing biology. Human behavior is influenced by a set of chemicals that evolved to help us survive. Endorphins help us push through physical pain. Dopamine rewards us for achieving goals. Serotonin makes us feel proud when we are respected by others. Oxytocin creates feelings of trust, bonding, and love. Modern organizations often exploit dopamine. Bonuses, targets, and incentives create short-term motivation, but also addiction. People chase the next win, the next promotion, the next reward, often at the expense of relationships and long-term stability. When organizations focus only on results, they overstimulate dopamine and neglect oxytocin. This creates cultures that feel exciting but empty, driven but fragile. Chapter 6. E.D.S.O. Sinek groups the 4 key chemicals into a system he calls E.D.S.O. Endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. Healthy organizations balance all 4. Endorphins and dopamine help us achieve. Serotonin and oxytocin help us bond and trust. When leaders focus only on performance, they starve the organization of trust. Leaders who prioritize relationships increase oxytocin, reducing stress and strengthening cooperation. Over time, this creates resilience and sustainable success. Chapter 7. The Big C. Cortisol is the stress chemical. It is useful in short bursts, helping us react to danger. But chronic cortisol exposure damages health, impairs judgment, and encourages selfish behavior. Fear-based workplaces flood people with cortisol. Employees focus on self-preservation rather than cooperation. Trust breaks down. Ethics erode. Leaders who rely on fear may achieve short-term results, but they destroy long-term performance and well-being. Chapter 8. Why we have leaders. Leadership exists for one primary reason: to protect the circle of safety. Leaders are responsible for setting the tone, values, and standards of behavior. Leadership is not about being in charge. It is about taking responsibility for the lives entrusted to you. When leaders fail to protect their people, the organization becomes vulnerable from within. Part 3. Reality. Chapter 9. The courage to do the right thing. Ethical leadership requires courage. Doing the right thing is often costly in the short term. It may mean turning down profit, admitting mistakes, or standing up to pressure. But these choices build trust. Over time, trust becomes a competitive advantage that cannot be replicated. Chapter 10. Snowmobile in the desert. Sinek explains that success can create blindness. Practices that work in one environment may fail in another. Leaders must adapt while staying true to their values. Without adaptability, organizations become fragile and disconnected from reality. Part 4. How we got here. Chapter 11. The boom before the bust. Sinek looks at economic history, showing how deregulation and obsession with shareholder value shifted priorities away from people. Trust eroded as numbers replaced relationships. This shift laid the groundwork for instability and crisis. Chapter 12. The boomers all grown up. Generational changes transformed the workplace. Expectations shifted, but leadership philosophies did not. The result was widespread disengagement and loss of trust. Sinek argues that rebuilding trust requires returning to human-centered leadership, where people come before profits. Part 5. The Abstract Challenge. Chapter 13. Abstraction Kills. Simon Sinek explains that as organizations grow, leaders become increasingly distant from the people affected by their decisions. This distance creates abstraction. People stop being individuals with faces, families, and emotions, and instead become numbers on a spreadsheet, headcount, or line items in a budget. Abstraction makes it easier to make harmful decisions. It is far easier to lay off 10,000 employees than it is to fire one person you know personally. When leaders are insulated from the human consequences of their choices, empathy erodes. Decisions may look rational on paper, but they often destroy trust and morale. Sinek argues that abstraction is one of the greatest threats to modern leadership. When leaders no longer see people, they stop feeling responsible for them. And when responsibility disappears, so does true leadership. Chapter 14. Modern Abstraction. Technology has dramatically increased abstraction. Emails replace conversations. Dashboards replace human stories. Metrics replace meaning. While technology improves efficiency, it also distances leaders from reality. Sinek explains that many leaders now experience their organizations almost entirely through screens. This makes it difficult to sense morale, stress, or fear. As a result, problems go unnoticed until they explode. Great leaders actively fight abstraction. They walk the floor, listen to stories, and stay connected to the lived experiences of their people. Human connection is not inefficient. It is essential. Chapter 15. Managing the Abstraction. Because abstraction cannot be eliminated, it must be managed. Sinek emphasizes that leaders must intentionally create systems that rehumanize decision-making. This includes spending time with employees, encouraging storytelling instead of only reporting, and ensuring leaders at every level are accountable for the people in their care. When leaders stay connected to reality, better decisions follow. Managing abstraction requires discipline, humility, and effort, but it protects the circle of safety. Chapter 16. Imbalance. Healthy organizations maintain balance between results and relationships. When imbalance occurs, when numbers matter more than people, the culture begins to decay. Sinek explains that leaders often chase short-term wins to satisfy external pressures. Over time, this erodes trust, increases stress, and weakens cooperation. Eventually, performance suffers. Sustainable success requires balance. Leaders must care deeply about results, while caring even more deeply about people. Part 6, Destructive Abundance. Chapter 17, Leadership Lesson 1. So goes the culture, so goes the company. Culture is shaped by behavior, not slogans. What leaders tolerate becomes the norm. What leaders reward becomes the culture. Sinek stresses that leaders are always role models, whether they intend to be or not. Their actions send powerful signals about what truly matters. A healthy culture starts at the top and spreads through consistent behavior. Chapter 18, Leadership Lesson 2. So goes the leader, so goes the culture. Leaders set the emotional tone of an organization. If leaders are fearful, impatient, or selfish, those traits ripple outward. Conversely, when leaders demonstrate calm, courage, and empathy, people feel safe. The emotional state of leadership directly affects performance, trust, and morale. Chapter 19, Leadership Lesson 3. Integrity Matters. Integrity is consistency between values and actions. Without integrity, trust collapses. Sinek explains that people are remarkably forgiving of mistakes, but they are unforgiving of hypocrisy. Leaders who say one thing and do another destroy credibility. Integrity builds long-term loyalty and strengthens the circle of safety. Chapter 20, Leadership Lesson 4. Friends Matter. Strong relationships are not a distraction from work. They're the foundation of great work. When people feel connected, they support each other during stress and uncertainty. These bonds increase resilience and cooperation. Leaders who encourage genuine relationships create organizations that can withstand pressure. Chapter 21, Leadership Lesson 5. Lead the people, not the numbers. Numbers are outcomes, not inputs. When leaders focus exclusively on metrics, they lose sight of what actually drives performance. Sinek argues that great leaders invest in people first. When people feel trusted and supported, the numbers take care of themselves. Part 7, A Society of Addicts. Chapter 22, At the center of all our problems is us. Sinek turns the lens inward. Systems do not exist on their own. People create and maintain them. By tolerating bad leadership, unethical behavior, or toxic cultures, we become complicit. Change begins when individuals choose courage over comfort. Chapter 23, At Any Expense. A mindset of winning at all costs damages trust, ethics, and long-term stability. Sinek shows that when leaders prioritize results over values, organizations eventually pay a heavy price. Short-term gains lead to long-term decline. Chapter 24, The Abstract Generation. Modern society has increased disconnection. Social media, constant stimulation, and lack of deep relationships contribute to anxiety and loneliness. Sinek connects this to leadership, arguing that organizations must provide environments of real human connection to counterbalance abstraction. Part 8, Becoming a Leader. Chapter 25, Step 12. Leadership is not a destination, it is a practice. Like recovery programs, leadership requires daily commitment, reflection, and humility. No one ever finishes becoming a leader. The work is ongoing. Chapter 26, Shared Struggle. Shared hardship builds trust faster than comfort ever could. Sinek explains that leaders who share sacrifice with their people strengthen loyalty. When leaders endure difficulty alongside their teams, bonds deepen. Chapter 27, We Need More Leaders. Leadership is not reserved for titles or positions. It is a choice available to everyone. When individuals choose to protect, support, and care for others, they become leaders. And when enough people make that choice, cultures change and organizations thrive. Leaders Eat Last ultimately reminds us that leadership is not about being in charge, but about taking care of those in our charge. When leaders create environments where people feel safe, trusted, and valued, cooperation replaces fear and performance follows naturally. The choice is simple but demanding. Protect people first, and they will protect the organization. This is how trust is built, cultures are strengthened, and true leadership begins.